Okay, this is the Eastern Cape, November 2020, grade 10, paper 2. Okay, so for question 1, this is the data handling question. So for the first part, 1.1, we're asked to, or 1.1.1, we're asked to fill in the missing numbers in this midpoint and frequency table. So that's quite straightforward. For the midpoint, that's the first number we're trying to find out. We just have to find the midpoint between those end class intervals. So I'm going to have 60 plus 70 divided by 2, which is 65. And then for this missing number, I just want the midpoint times the frequency, right? So the midpoint for this one is 55, and the frequency for this one is 7. So my answer is just going to be 7 times 5, which is 385. Okay, if you're unsure of whether or not you're doing the right calculations, you can compare it with the other rows. So for example, I can see that the midpoint for this one is 75, and that is indeed halfway between 70 and 80. And if I take the midpoint times the frequency, 2 times 75 is 150. So it's going to be the same procedure for all of the rows. So just to double check that you're doing the right calculation, you can compare the calculations that were done in the other rows. All right, and then next 1.1.2, we're asked to find the estimate of the mean. So the estimate of the mean is x bar, and that is going to be equal to the sum of the midpoints times the frequencies divided by the sum of all the frequencies. So I can write it like this. It's the sum of the midpoint times the frequency divided by the sum of all the frequencies. So if I sum up all of these numbers here, I get 1,360. And that's going to be divided by the sum of all of these numbers here, and that is 28. And so my final answer is going to be 48.6. So for this next part, 1.1.3, I've been asked to draw the frequency polygon of the data in the table. And so what that means is that I'm just going to plot the points x and y, where my y values are going to be the class intervals, so that's going to be the marks from 0 to 30, and my x values is going to be the frequency of how many people got that mark or got in between that range of marks. So for my y points, I'm going to use the midpoints of the classes. So this is going to be my y coordinates, and then for my x coordinates, I'm going to use the frequency of the classes. So I just plot on the graph as normal. So for the first one, my midpoint was 15. So I'm going to have the y value somewhere here. And then the frequency was 2. So this is the 15 and this is the 2. So I'm going to plot the point here. And then I just continue for the rest. So the next one is going to be 3 and 35. And 11 and 45. And 2 and 75 is here, and I've got 0 for 90. All right, and then I just join up all my points. And that's my frequency polygon. Okay, then for 1.1.4, I'm asked, there's 2 parts. So in part A, I'm asked in which interval does the median lie. So my median is going to be the number that's exactly halfway between all of my frequency points. So remember that we found that the sum of the frequencies was 28. And so the median is going to be 28 divided by 2, the 14th number. And if I go back to look at my class intervals, I see that the 14th number is in this interval here, this 40 times 50, because this one has 2. Then in these two, I would find numbers up to 5. Then in all of these, I would find numbers up to 16. So for this one, so for the 30th to 40th, I've only got numbers up to 5, but then from the 40th to the 50th, I've got numbers up to 16, which means that the 15th number must lie in this interval here. Okay, so my answer is this interval. And then for part B, I'm asked where does the 80th percentile lie? And now the 80th percentile, again, I'm going to use the sum of the frequencies. That was 28. And the 80th percentile just means that I want this number here, the 0.8 times 28, or 80% times 28. Same thing, and that is equal to 22.4. And then it's asked me which interval does this number lie in, so I want to find where 22.4 lies. And I go back to my information, and it looks like it lies in this interval. The 50, x is between 50 and 60. And that's my answer. Now for part 1.2, I'm given the marks of a class of students. So these are their marks here. And I'm asked to find out the following things. So the first is to find the median mark for this class. So what's important to remember is that anytime you're finding the median or the quartiles or the interquartile range and things like that, the numbers have to be in ascending order. So before I do anything, I check, and yes, my numbers are in ascending order. So I can just go ahead and find the median. And I like to do it like this so that I know that I'm not making a mistake. So I'm just crossing down each of the numbers until I meet myself in the middle. Okay, so my median is 64. Then the next part is asking me to find the interquartile range. So the IQR is going to be equal to Q3 minus Q1, right? Quartile 1 and quartile 3. And to find those, I go from my median, which is 64, and I'm finding the halfway points of the halfway point of the data. So I've already found that the halfway point of the whole data set is 64. So to find my upper quartile, which is Q3, I want to find the halfway point in between the upper half of all the data. So I'm only going to look at these numbers. And then when I want to find Q1, the lower quartile, I'm going to only use the lower half of the data, and I'm going to find the halfway point in between those. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with my median, crossing these numbers until I find myself in the middle. So this one's 53, and then this one is 74. So I'm going to say since Q3 equals 74 and Q1 is equal to 53, then my interquartile range is equal to 74 minus 53, and that's equal to 21. Okay, and then next I'm asked to represent this data on a box and whisker diagram. So in my box and whisker diagram, I have to have 5 things. I need the minimum, the maximum, the Q1, the Q3, and the Q2, which is the median. Q2 is the median. So first I'm going to mark off my min and my max. So I go back to my data and I can see that my minimum is 45 and my maximum is 89. So I can mark these on the box plot. So here's 45. And here's 89, just before 90. Then I want to mark my Q1 and my Q3. So we found that the Q3 was 74, which is about here. And then the Q1 was 53, which is about here. And then my Q2, which is my median, is 64, which is about here. Okay, so I joined the Q1 and the Q2 and the Q3 in the box. And then my whiskers are just going to be the lines that join my min and my max. And that's my diagram. And then it's asked me to comment on the distribution of the data with reference to the box and whisker diagram. So that means that I'm going to look at my box and whisker diagram, and I can see that this bit here on the left-hand side is bigger than this bit here on the right-hand side. And so I'm going to say that the data is skewed to the left. Okay, so moving on to question 2, I'm given a triangle ABC, and I'm given the coordinates of A, B, and C, and I'm told that P and Q are the midpoints of AB and AC respectively. So if P is the midpoint of AB, then that means that AP is equal to PB. And if Q is the midpoint of BC, then that means that BQ is equal in length to QC. Okay, then I can start answering the questions. So the first asked me to calculate the coordinates of P and Q. So I was told that P is the midpoint of these 2 points, and that Q is the midpoint of these 2 points. And so I can just use the midpoint formula to find the coordinates of each of them. So starting with P, I know that P is the midpoint of AB, which means that it's halfway between the x coordinates of A and B, and it's halfway between the y coordinates of A and B. Right, so xa is -2, xb is -6, added together is -8, and divided by 2 is -4. And then ya is 4 and yb is -2. If I add them together, I get 2 divided by 2 is 1. And I can do a similar thing for q, so that's the midpoint BC, and using the same formula, and I get that this point is 1, 0. Okay, and I can fill that in on the diagram. 1, 0, and -4, 1. Okay, next I'm asked to prove that PQ, which is this line, is parallel to AC. And I know that 2 lines are parallel if their gradients are the same. So I can find the gradient of PQ because I now have the coordinates of P and Q. And I can find the gradient of AC because I was given that from the beginning. And then I can check that the gradients are the same, which is then going to prove that they are parallel. So I'm going to start with the gradient for PQ. So MPQ is equal to the change in y over the change in x. So I'm going to have the y coordinate of P, which is 1 minus the y coordinate of Q, 0, and then the x coordinate of P minus the x coordinate of Q. And I get that this is -1/5. And then I'm finding the gradient of the other line now, so this is MAC, is still equal to the change in y over the change in x, and this time I'm going to have the coordinates of A, so the y coordinate of A is 4 minus the y coordinate of C, which is 8, it's 2, sorry, and then the x coordinate of A is -2 minus 8, which is the x coordinate of C, and then I'm going to get that this is equal to 2 over -10, which can be simplified to -1 over 5. And then I can say, since MPQ is equal to MAC, PQ is parallel to AC. Okay, so now I know that they're parallel, and I'm going to fill that in on my diagram. Okay, and then the second part of 2.2.2 has asked me to show that PQ is equal to half AC. So that means that half of the length of AC is the length of PQ. So I can find the length of both of those things by using the distance formula. So I'm going to start with PQ. And I'm going to say the distance PQ, that's the same as the length, is equal to the square root of x of P minus x of Q squared plus y of P minus y of Q squared. Okay, square root. Alright, so the x coordinate of P we found was 1, and then minus the x coordinate of Q, which is, the x coordinate of P is -4. Then the x coordinate of Q is 1, so -1 is squared. And then I'll have the y coordinate of P, which is 1, minus the y coordinate of Q, which is 0, squared. And then I've got this first bracket is going to be 5 squared, so it's 25. And then this next bracket is going to be 1 squared, which is 1. And then this is going to be the square root of 26. Okay, and I can simplify that to 5.1. And then I'm going to find the distance of AC. So using the same formula, except that here I'm going to have the x coordinate of A and the y coordinate of A. And then here I'm going to have the x coordinate of C and the y coordinate of C. I'm going to end up with the square root of 104. And that is equal to 10.2. Then I can see that half of the distance AC is equal to half of the distance PQ, or I can say that 2 times the distance of PQ is equal to the distance of AC. And so now you've proved that PQ is half AC. Okay, and then next we're asked to find the perimeter of the triangle ABC. So I've already found the length AC, which is great. So DAC equals 10.2. So I already have this in the perimeter. And then I'm going to need to find these two lengths as well to add them together. Okay, so I'm going to use the distance formula again. So I'm going to start with AB this time. So the distance AB is equal to square root x of a minus x of b squared plus y of a minus y of b squared. And I'm going to have square root. So x of a was minus 2 and x of b is minus 6. So I'm going to have minus 2 minus, and then the b is negative 6. So I've got two minuses here. That's going to become a plus. And all of that squared. Plus, then the y coordinates, the y of a was 4 minus, and b was minus 2. And that's also going to become a plus. And this is all squared. So in the first bracket, I'm going to have negative 2 plus 6, which is 4, squared. And then for the second one, I'm going to have 4 plus 2, which is 6 squared. And 4 squared is 16, and 6 squared is 36. So 16 plus 36 is equal to 52. And that's my answer. Root 52 is the answer for the distance of AB. And then I can find the distance of BC in the same way. So using the same distance formula, and I'm going to find that this is equal to the root of square root 212. Then my perimeter of triangle ABC is equal to the distance AC plus the distance AB plus the distance BC. So the AC was 10.2. The AB was square root 52. And the BC was square root 212. And my final answer is going to be 31.97.